Hey everybody. So it is Friday, which means it's time to do NHL Remember Him. This is episode 22 of the series. And last week I did Max Afinogenov, who I remember very, very well from those mid-2000s Buffalo Sabres teams. And doing Afinogenov made me think of another player who played on those Sabres teams, but also had a great career in other places, particularly Philadelphia, around the NHL. And this episode is going to be about Daniel Briere. Danny Briere was drafted in 1996 by the Phoenix Coyotes, then Phoenix Coyotes, now Arizona, in the first round, 24th overall. Over the course of his career, he played 973 games, scoring 307 goals, 389 assists, for 696 points. So almost 1,000 games, almost 700 points. Just fell short of those two particular milestones. On top of that, he played 124 playoff games in his career. That just shows how, he was on good teams for most of his career, and he was on a lot of teams that went deep into the playoffs, conference final teams, Stanley Cup final team in 2010 with Philadelphia. He was on good teams. 124 playoff games, 53 goals and 63 assists for 116 points. He was almost a point per game player in the playoffs. And that's something that, he wasn't a point per game player in the regular season, but he was a great playoff performer. He was somebody that you wanted on your team in the postseason because he racked up points in the playoffs. He was a great, great playoff performer, and he was in the playoffs a lot, which certainly, that's it's not like he only played, 12 playoff games and had 12 playoff points and was point per game in the playoffs that way. No, 124 playoff games. He was in the playoffs all the time, and he had 116 playoff points. So this was over a large period of time and over, with different teams, and there's a large sample size. He was a tremendous playoff point producer. So Briere started his career with the Phoenix Coyotes in 1997. He only played 5 games that first year, but then he became more of a regular in the lineup and played with Phoenix until 2002. In the 2002-2003 season, he was sent to Buffalo, and that's really where his career. He had a couple really good seasons with Phoenix, a 60-point season, then a 46-point season. But the year that he got traded, he had 46 points with the Coyotes. But at the time of his trade, things really took off for Danny Briere when he got to Buffalo. In the remaining games of the 2002-2003 season with the Sabres, he had 12 points in 14 games. And then the next year, in his first full season with Buffalo in 2003-2004, he had 65 points. Once he got to Buffalo, things really started to, he had some really, really good seasons. His best season of his entire career came with the Sabres in 2006-2007, which was his last season with Buffalo. He had 95 points that year, 32 goals and 63 assists for Briere with the Sabres that year. Absolutely his best point total in a season, without a doubt. No other year really even comes close. And then he went to Philadelphia from 2007 all the way through 2013. He played a number of years in Philadelphia, 6 years with the Flyers. He had 72 points his first year with Philly in 07-08. He went to the Stanley Cup final with Philadelphia in 2009-2010, the year that they lost to Chicago. He had 53 points in the regular season that year. He had a tremendous year in 2010, 2011 with the Flyers. He scored 34 goals and 34 assists for 68 points that year. Another 30-goal season for him, which he had multiple throughout his career. And then things started to die off a little bit. That 2010, 2011 was his last, high-level, high-point producing year with those 68 points. The next year, he only played 70 games and had 49 points. His final year in Philadelphia, 2012-2013, he missed a lot of time with injury. He only played 34 games and had 16 points in those 34 games. He went to Montreal for a year in 2013-14, hoping that, a change of scenery and a new team could maybe bring the spark back a little bit. But in 69 games with the Canadiens that year, he only had 25 points. And at this point, he's an older player, and that's his 16th year in the league, and he's really starting to show some decline in his play, which is natural and happens to everyone. 2014-2015, he went to Colorado for one season. He only played 57 games that year and only had a very disappointing 12 points. And that was the end of Daniel Briere in the NHL. 17 seasons in the league, a tremendous career. Definitely a player I loved watching. I remember vividly from Buffalo and Philadelphia, and I obviously remember his stops in Montreal and Colorado at the end as well, but those weren't as good of years for him. The prime of his career came when he was with Buffalo and Philadelphia, and he had some absolutely tremendous seasons with those teams. I think he had 4 or 5 30-goal seasons throughout his career. 2001, 2002, he had 32 goals. 2006, 2007, he had 32 goals. 2007, 2008, he had 31 goals. And 2010, 2011, he had 34 goals. So those were his 30-goal seasons. He could produce points. If he stayed healthy, he was well up near, 60, 70-something points. He had the one season where he had 95, which was by far the best year of his career. And other than that, he was often limited with injuries, and that did not help his point totals and for certain seasons throughout his career. But he was a very solid second-line player, a really fun player to watch, and not a big guy at all, only 5'9", 174 pounds. And you've got to remember that being 5'9", 174 in the NHL now is a lot different than being 5'9", 174 in the NHL when Daniel Briere came in the late 90s and early 2000s. That wasn't the speed and skill NHL that we have now, where smaller players are starting to thrive. That was the big, brutish, physical, violent old NHL still. And for a player like Briere to even make the league at that size was an accomplishment back then, and not an easy thing to do. It was a lot harder to do that as a small player then than it is now. So Briere's, really was good enough to overcome the small size and still put together a tremendous NHL career. 17 seasons, almost 1,000 games played, just short of 700 points. Really good second-line player. Really fun to watch. A guy I always liked and respected. And he had some great seasons with Buffalo. He had some great seasons with Philadelphia, and was a really important part of those teams. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.